One.
Okay. I'm gonna get out of the way.
All set?
All set. I don't know if you might have another few seconds. It's up to you. I'm gonna pull up the YouTube page and switch it.
All right. City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals meeting is hereby called to order on September 15th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Mr. Gano, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Ms. Crowe,
Present.
Mr. Armbruster,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Parsons,
Here.
and Mr. Kozla.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum tonight, 5 people here, and Mr. Whitner has an excused absence.
Okay, thank you. Barry, could you please inform everyone in attendance of the Board of Zoning Appeals meeting procedures?
This meeting has been duly advertised in the Suburbanite and the Southside News Leader weekly newspapers, as well as the City of New Franklin website and the City of New Franklin Facebook page. The City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals is governed under Robert's Rules of Order. All comments and questions shall be directed to the chairperson of the board throughout the duration of the entire meeting. The audience must refrain from conducting any side conversations or interrupting the meeting. Please be advised the board may or may not render a decision on the items before it this evening. Additional information may be required from the respective applicants, or additional information may be sought from the city engineer, city law director, or other sources in order to reach an informed decision. Each person who plans to speak this evening shall approach the podium and state his or her name and home address for the official record. Per the City of New Franklin zoning code, the time for each speaker is limited to 5 minutes. However, applicants may require more time to present their request to the board. Please, only one person shall speak at a time. Lastly, each speaker will be administered a testimony oath by the chairperson before giving testimony before the board.
Thank you. First up on our agenda tonight, we have the BZA appeal. City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals will hold a YouTube live stream public hearing on Tuesday, September 15th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. from New Franklin City Hall to hear the following revised carryover request. 2020 BZA 02, Joseph J. Buzka, 4907 Pullman Drive, New Franklin, Ohio 44319. Requesting the following variances after the fact within the RL High Density Residential District from A, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 36 feet 10 inches or 13 feet 2 inches from the water's edge, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum front yard lakeside setback distance of 50 feet 0 inches from the water's edge, and from B, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 14 feet and 0 inches or 1 foot 0 inches from the west property line. Whereas the zoning code requires a minimum side yard setback distance of 15 feet 0 inches from either side property line. And from C, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 9 feet 8 inches or 15 feet 4 inches from the rear or street side property line. Whereas the zoning code requires a minimum setback distance of 25 feet 0 inches from the rear or street side property line. And from D, Article 6, Section 600.03B3, whereas the zoning code requires a Board of Zoning Appeals review of any variance located within the front yard lakeside property within the RL High Density Residential District in order to approve an existing pergola structure on the property. Note, the landscape framing timber shall be removed from the street right-of-way area per the Board of Zoning Appeals. Who will be speaking on behalf of the BZA appeal?
I'd like to make a presentation if I could, somewhat of a statement.
Okay, if I could just have you state your name and your address.
Absolutely, Robert McNamara, 12370 West, Uniontown, Ohio.
Okay, and sir, I'm swear you in. Raise your
Okay, I'm
hand.
not going to be giving testimony, but that's fine.
Okay, you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
Yes.
Okay.
First of all, I wanted to go through the photo group that I provided to you and tell you what they are and why they're there. Obviously, Exhibit A only is the aerial view showing the exact location of the property, which probably doesn't come into play. The second listing with the hash marks is, I believe, pretty important. It shows the various setback areas and the distances from the existing building. As you'll see in yellow, that is the BZA home. And in fact, it is certainly not within the parameters of setbacks that are required. The light tan area is the area that would be permissible under the zoning code with the setbacks in place. You can see that is only a 10 by 16 area that would be permitted. The area that Joe is looking to build a pergola on is 20 by 25. So you can see that as well. The third photo, Exhibit C, simply is there to show you that the timbers have been removed from the driveway so that there's no question that we're out of the right of way. Exhibit D is a photo of where the pergola is going, and the reason that that's there, I want to make sure that everyone understands there was a garage structure on this property. The garage had been pulled down some years ago. You can see where the cement starts, that is the garage slab. The pergola is built on the garage slab. It would have been in a situation where if it were a garage, it had 1,000 square feet. The building that Joe is building, the pergola that Joe is wanting to build is 20 by 25, which is only approximately 506 square feet actually. Exhibit E reflects a photo of a very large tree stump. And that is the reason that the pergola was designed to be built. That tree died and came down. When it did, it took out the fireplace that was Joe's, an outdoor fireplace. It took out a number of seating areas that he had existing, and that is what is being replaced inside the pergola. The Exhibit F shows the distance between the neighbor's building and the outside edge of the pergola. We measured that yesterday at just over 11 feet. And Joe will provide testimony concerning that. Exhibit G we provided is an older picture, but it shows the driveway as it existed before the pergola, actually several years old. But you can see the Volkswagen pulled in front on what you sometimes refer to as patio. It really was a driveway. The area on the right is access to the garage. And finally, Exhibit H is another older photo. The reason that that's there is it shows that the land across the street. We wanted to make sure you knew that that is owned by Mr. BZA. So tonight we will hear testimony from both neighbors on either side in favor of allowing the pergola. And of course, we're in a situation where we believe that the pergola, in fact, is consistent with what's going on in the community. We're not asking that you should go out and see how many other people have setback or violating the setback rules. But one of the things you have to take into account is whether or not this is consistent across the board with the community. And it is. It's well within the parameters of what's being done in the community. It promotes, we believe, community spirit from the point of view that a number of people come over, utilize the pergola with Joe. We believe that it does not adversely affect any governmental services, particularly in light of the fact that the timbers have been removed. I know that was a big concern. We don't believe that the pergola is part of the driveway in any event. It's totally separate. So one of the big points here, we believe we would be able to have 1,000 square foot garage structure if we wanted to. Instead, we're requesting a 500 square foot pergola section. The 500 square foot area, you can see through, you can see the lake. It's not in any way inhibiting view. Neighbors have absolutely no problem with it. But we're in a situation where we believe that it will promote values in the community. Certainly will not be a detriment to the values of the property owner. And as I say, it is consistent with the area and what's going on in the area. With that, I would turn it over to Joe to make whatever statement he wants. And then, as I understand it, if I'm understanding you correctly, I'll have a chance to ask Joe some questions if in fact he doesn't bring everything out that needs to be brought up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
One question,
Yeah.
McNamara. You do acknowledge that if you had that 1,000 square foot garage, you'd still be subject to setbacks on property, on the sides of the property.
Yes, but I will also say that the code specifically provides that any structure in the township, that any structure the size of Mr. Mosby's home is allowed 1,000 square foot garage.
But it is subject to setbacks on the side property.
That may be, but it is specifically allowed.
Thank you,
It is specifically allowed.
thank you. I realize that.
Oh, and there's been one other question that has been raised. I don't know by who, but apparently there was some question as to whether this was a two-story pergola. It is not. There is a small structure on the top, maybe not so small. There's a structure on the top which is intended to be developed into a planter and like a cupola kind of thing. But it does not have access for people or anything like that.
Mr. McNamara, before you sit down.
Yes, sir.
Oh, please, yes.
On Exhibit D, there is a bit of wood that looks like it's being stained or finished in some way.
Mhm.
Where is that intended to go?
Actually, I don't know the answer to that. You're gonna have to ask Mr. Mosby that. He is doing some remodeling work on his home. I don't know if he's simply staying for that or if this is also going to be on that pergola. Sorry, I couldn't answer that.
That's okay.
All right, anything else?
Not right now, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Buzzka.
Hi,
I'm well, thank you. How are you? You could please state your full name and address for the record?
I'm Joseph J. Bosdale, 49.
Okay. I have you raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief? And if you could please in detail describe your project and the reason of your interest is required.
The project is a pergola. The variance, not to my knowledge, is necessary. That's why we're here. I have no other knowledge of needing it. Effectively, I was just building it to replace things that were damaged from the tree. The structure is not even structured, or never structured. We're actually in a lot worse shape from boundary line is what I'm actually trying to develop. The hammock swings close to the jump stop, almost 1 or 4 ounce. The fireplace was also close to the jump. But really what I was trying to do is just wrap everything up in a more ergonomic fashion, conducive with a lot of things that go on in there. I don't think I was being egregious by what doing what I did. I just thought I was just replacing. I think that's just not. I'd just be repetitive of what he was doing.
Anything, before we get there, do we need to ask, does anybody have any ex parte communications or do they have to abstain from this particular case?
No.
Please, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may. Mr. Buzzka, you do understand that you're supposed to demonstrate a practical difficulty of why you cannot meet code and why you're seeking it.
I really don't understand the language.
So essentially, I think what he's saying is you have to tell us why you can't conform to what the zoning code requires. Why do you need?
There is no way for it to flow correctly with my house. No way to build without being the distances that are actually exist. I had to build according to the zoning code. I couldn't build effectively. It's not conducive with any house in the neighborhood to follow that zone. I don't know how it actually came to be. Nothing in that neighborhood is within the distance required. And some of the houses, actually, the street would actually be. And I don't really remember all the languages, but it's just not be done.
Mr. Chairman, I've been out there 3 times, Mr. Buzzard, and I agree. Unfortunately, all those properties are in one way or another not. So, I understand what you're saying.
If I could add one thing, the reason for that exhibit 2 with the hash marks in there, if we were to comply with the setback, you can see that the proposal would be 10 feet by 16, 160 square feet, which doesn't work. There's no way they can build it and within the code and within the setbacks, and be in a situation where it will comply and where it will resolve any of the issues that we have relative to rebuilding the fireplace and things of that nature. Also, one thing that I had forgotten to mention, while he's here, he may want to testify to this. It seemed from the last hearing that perhaps some of the difficulty was that he had started this project without a variance, without approval from the zoning board. And I wanted to make certain that everybody knew, and Mr. President will testify that he did not think he needed a permit. He checked with the neighbors to obtain their approval as to what he was doing. He was building it on a garage site that had existed before, so he felt as though he was simply replacing a smaller structure that already in existence and had been grandfathered in. So he was not doing this in an effort to in any way avoid the zoning commission. He thought that he was doing it correctly. The burden's on him, I understand that. On the other hand, I want to be aware that it's not done in any way of attempting to avoid or the
Thank you.
and Mr. President will certainly testify to that.
Thank you. Member. I don't think I have anything on that issue.
Despite slight breach of etiquette and calling Mr. Chair.
That's okay. I took it twice, you know?
I apologize.
It's broad shoulders.
Are you asking me if I have any questions for you?
You did have a question regarding the site.
I do, but so let me know what that is.
At my house. And we're just, I'm just,
Your house would be that natural.
see, there'll be some stuff. That'll match. Chimney. It's all, well, it might. It's also big, work. But yeah, just prepping most of the stuff.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, let's don't forget Eric.
Eric,
I don't have any questions at this time.
thank you. Anything additional? All right, thank you, sir. At this time, we will ask if anybody is here to speak for the variance. Come on up, sir. Could you please state your full name and home address?
It's Charles J. Ziller.
And your home address?
4294 Coleman. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Our former name is Massey.
Okay. You said Coleman?
Coleman Drive.
You back in 44319? All right. Could you raise your right hand? You solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief. You testify your security speak in favor of the variance.
Yes. Anything that Bill has ever done in the fall of years was turned out very nice. Basically done. Travel. And further, I think value of our properties complements the neighborhood. As far as being able to see it from my house, our garage is where I can't see it all. I wish I could see it.
Is this your garage?
That's
This is exhibit F.
Uh,
So he's the property closest to the burn.
Okay, that was gonna be my question. Where are you in terms of the home? Okay.
If you're facing away from the street, around and they're in public resources. How am I supposed to hang out? I have one question.
Thanks.
You are immediately next door to Joe, is that correct? And you have no objection to, building, even though. You know, being a neighbor in the area, are you able to see the lake, with the pergola there? Absolutely. So that doesn't obstruct the view of the lake to any great extent? It's not. I cannot see what you want on my house.
So, sir, do you believe the pergola is consistent with buildings in the neighborhood?
I believe it is consistent as far as, it's different from something, but it's a very nice structure. And I think it enhances it. I don't say it really has anything that's exactly like that. It is what
Insert your testimony that this will not affect the property value in the negative one.
I do not think so.
Thank you.
Anything further? Thank you, sir.
Can I comment on anything else?
If you would like to.
There are some properties in the neighborhood. Houses, even if they're lovely, they will fall down. A couple of times, you know, it's sitting there so long. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know if it's septic or something. And I don't pull the yard up. We dug up for over a year. And that's something like that. That is, as far as I know, maybe you're aware of what's going on. I don't know.
And unfortunately, that's not the role of the BZA, but
Right. Well,
I understand your concern.
Right. Now, those are absolutely.
Sir, we do have a property enforcement individual. You should probably talk to Mr. Dino's office and call attention to those items. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Anybody else here to speak in favor of the variance?
Not a very good speaker.
That's okay. If I could just get you to start with your name and your full address.
Pamela S. McFeely, 4899 Coleman Alley, Franklin, 44319.
Okay, could you raise your right hand for me? Please swear to affirm the testimony you're about to give is true to the best of your knowledge and belief. Thank you. Please go ahead. Why are you in favor of the variance, ma'am?
Well, I see nothing wrong or unsightly with the pergola that Joe put together on his property. If you're worried about the construction, about obstructing anyone's view, it does not. What would be complaining if you put up a two-car garage, with the view of the lake. It provides a gathering place for his family, friends, neighbors. I myself have lived next door to Joe the last 20 years. He might not start his projects in the most conventional way, but once he has them completed, they've always turned out to look great. Joe's structure does not affect anything or anyone. It's just going to be a nice gathering place. Joe and Sue will probably be living there the rest of their lives, just as my husband and I. And in 30 or 40 years, if it needs to be sold, nobody's going to really care about this people at that time. We're concerned right now is with property lines. I have a neighbor's garage sitting exactly on my property line. It didn't seem like the zoning committee, anybody did anything about it when it was built. And that's why, that's the way it is around the lakes, and it'll continue to be. This is just consistent with everything in our community.
So can I ask a question? It's the same as Mr. Parsons asked earlier. Where are you as it relates to Mr. Parsons' property?
On the east, directly next door.
Next door.
Next door. Okay.
Yes.
So the opposite side of the freeway.
Yes.
Okay.
And you are Pamela Murray.
Yes.
I found out that apparently I read lips as much as I hear, so these masks have really straightened me out. Thank you.
Well, I shortened my name a little bit for you guys.
Thank you.
Anybody
Questions? Man, do you feel that the pergola is consistent with other structures in the neighborhood?
I most certainly do.
And do you feel it will affect the value of your property in any negative way?
It will not.
Thank you.
Do you believe it will affect the value of the property?
Of course.
Thank you. Anybody additional here for the variance?
What's that?
Is anybody here to speak in favor of the variance? Come on, sir. I can get you to state your full name and address for the record.
My name is Jack Broder, 4899 Mullen. I live directly east of Joe's house.
I can get you to raise your, thank you. Do you swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and ability?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Why are you here to speak for the variance, sir?
Well, for one thing, this whole thing has been carrying on for such a long time. And I'm totally fed up with the way the community seems to be handling it. And the variance should have been awarded 6 months ago. And it's been nothing but cost Joe extra money for attorneys, surveyors, drawings, all 9 years. And I've been there 42 years. And if I would, somebody had told me that we would have put through somebody through this, get a variance. I wouldn't think.
Mr. Broder, with all due respect, because we are in a time schedule tonight, I'm gonna ask specifically, what are you here to say in favor of the variance?
Well, I'm not against it at all. I've been in court for 6 months. And I just think that it should be just taken care of.
Okay, so you're here just to affirm as a neighbor that you are in favor of the variance, not opposed, correct?
Yes, I don't see anything derogatory about that. Yeah, project. Anything Joe does, and I've known him for 30-some years, it's been carried out well, and it's will do nothing but, there's a lot of other things in the neighborhood that distract from cost of that property, not his property.
Okay, so if I'm hearing your testimony correctly, it's your belief that this pergola structure will improve the value of your property?
I think it nothing but enhance it. There's several things in our neighborhood mentioned earlier that would help us also.
Okay, thank you so much. Do any of the board members have questions? Thank you so much, sir. Oh, Josie? Eric, do you have a question?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you, sir. Is anybody else here to speak for the variance request?
Taylor is here to speak for variance, but she has previously provided a letter or an email, and she's indicated that in an effort to move things along more quickly, she would happily just have another read, if that's what she would prefer.
Looks like I have an email from Monday, September 14th at 9:22.
I've not seen the letter.
Yeah, so I'll just read this into the record briefly. It says, Dear Zoning and Planning Committee of New Franklin, we, Chuck and Joanne Zaylor, 4923 Coleman Alley, are neighbors to Joseph Busquets' property. We understand the issue at hand with the zoning pool setbacks established by the city of New Franklin. We understand the committee is able to grant variances for any of the zoning pools. This is why we are reaching out to you. We would like the committee's approval for the complication of the pergola of Mr. Busquets' property because it will enhance the aesthetics of the neighborhood. Joe is an extremely intelligent man who is also a visionary with artistic talent to create. There could be a pile of old wood. My husband would burn it. On the other hand, Joe would sand, stain, or paint it, make it a beautiful table, antique shelves, or cabinets out of it. We are not sure how many of you have driven down Coleman Alley and around Pascanos Lakeside Pub. There are quite a few lots which bring shame to our neighborhood. 2 houses right next to each other, have not had anyone live in them or have taken care of the outside structures in 11 years in which we have been there. Next to those houses are two old broken down pontoon boats sitting in the grass with weeds on the outside, rust on the outside, and no motors. Then another vacant house across from Dano's. The grass was so high midsummer it was difficult to see the house and the yard. It's been dug up for over a year. Now those are issues. You may be thinking these properties have nothing to do with this hearing, but within the overall big picture, they do. These properties bring down the quality of our neighborhood. With that being said, the completion of the pergola will enhance and even upgrade the property, not only for Mr. Buzzcut, but for all of us on Coleman. Thank you for giving consideration to what is going on in our neighborhood. Sincerely, Chuck and Joanne Ziegler. So we don't have anybody speaking against the variance request at this time. Does the board have any remaining questions?
I do. Mr. Buzzkill, would you accept the couple conditions for this? Number one would be that you do not complete the pergola as a second floor or deck on top.
It's not a deck.
Well, you don't plan to include it as a deck. It would be just as a condition.
Oh, it's not. Yeah, it's just a show.
Okay. And number two, that you don't again put timber or patio down on the city's property as part of the road. So I don't know how you're gonna finish that now, but I'm glad you took it away. Thank you for that.
No, I would have done it, somebody brought up first. I didn't know that much difficulty. I think I brought it up during our first conversation. I couldn't figure out, first 20 minutes we're talking about paving. No, I've got to blend it something. It'll be blended in some way. I don't know. Probably be a combination of gravel and tar, just something like that. I just
I mean, as long as there's not a raised surface at the snow plow.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Armbruster, just to be absolutely clear, while there is no plan to install a second story or second level that could be utilized by individuals
As a deck.
as a deck, there is an area that is built above the level of the pergola for aesthetic purposes only, not for use as a deck. As I indicated earlier, it sounds as though there's going to be some plant overhang on that area. It will be aesthetic. It's there for aesthetic purposes, but I don't want that.
It'll probably be like.
I think that's fine.
Crow's nest.
I mean, the whole idea is we're not calling this a pergola, we're actually building a deck.
No.
Thank you. I suggest that be a
Can I
condition.
ask a
I
question?
Sure.
Has the structure been inspected by a building inspector?
We've had several people out there.
Because I know everything that you build in any city has to be approved by a building inspector.
Barry, do you have a comment?
Well, yes, you would have to apply for a building permit ultimately for this thing. He already did get the health department approval. Then we have the pending zoning. And the last step is he does have to have a building permit from Summit County Building Standards.
I did too.
Mr. Kozla is correct on that.
But that could come after the variance request,
Correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay, thank you, Mr. Bernard.
Generally before it's built.
Yes, the building inspector
We missed a step. We did that intentionally, but we missed.
has to make sure that it's built to code.
Right, if there's nothing else, we can go ahead and get into the discussion regarding the Supreme Court criteria. So the first is whether the property will yield a reasonable return or whether there should be a beneficial use of the property without the variance. I would say there can be. It has
I would agree.
it's been existing without the variance request. Whether the variance is substantial.
It is substantial, for sure.
I would second that because it's so close to the property line.
Whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment. I think all the adjoining neighbors here have stated that they believe that it would improve.
I agree.
Okay. Whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services.
I don't think that it would.
Likewise.
Because of we have a special section of our code for lakefront properties. So I don't think.
Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. I believe his testimony is he did not know this restriction. That's why he sort of initiated the project, unaware of what the issues were, although I think that there's always incumbent upon property owners to know that there are zoning restrictions out there. This specific request was not known, is my understanding. Okay. Whether the problem can be resolved by some manner other than the granting of a variance.
Yeah, I would suggest that because you can only put up a 10 by 16 pergola, and you have a practical difficulty in constructing something usable.
I would likewise agree.
I appreciated your comment with the architectural integrity and finished product. And I think this goes to
Whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of the zoning requirement, and whether substantial justice would be done by granting the variance.
it does in my
See, that is heard.
Eric?
Eric?
I don't believe it goes with the spirit and intent of our zoning code.
I'm sorry.
What about substantial justice? Eric has indicated he doesn't believe it. What about substantial justice, Eric? Do you have anything on that?
I do not.
All right, any additional discussion?
Well, I just, Madam Chairperson, I just like to read the general purpose section of the code,
Okay.
section 100.04. And that it reads as follows: the provisions of this zoning code, as most recently amended, shall be interpreted and applied to health, safety, comfort, prosperity, and general welfare pursuant to Ohio Vice Code section, chapter 713.06, and the exercise of power authority pursuant to home rule of Ohio Constitution, Article 18, subsection 3. I think it is consistent with that. I think it is consistent with the comfort, convenient, prosperity, general welfare. So Eric, I disagree. I believe it is consistent with the intent of the code.
Any additional comments on that, Mr. Arnold?
Well, I think there's no denying the fact that being within 2 feet of a property line is something that generally would not be okay. Unfortunately, zoning on the lake is the zoning on the lake. And we've been through this many times. It's almost impossible to enforce some of those provisions with the water, especially the setback. I don't think any of the neighbors are 50 feet back from the water. I mean, I've looked down there 2-3 times, and it's unfortunate. A lot of people have built things in the past without zoning approval, but this is consistent with what's been done in the past.
So if there's nothing additional, we would entertain a motion.
I don't really know if you're aware of the fact that about 25 years ago, we were offered the possibility of buying out into the lake our property line. And our property line goes out into the lake probably 20 feet. And all of it, all along there, Joe included, and myself, we paid extra for that property line. So where do you judge your property?
Sir, I don't think we have any knowledge of that. I think that was between you and the state of Ohio. Not the city was not a party to that.
Well, we're in the city.
City was not a party to
Well,
that
at that time, there
transaction.
was no city.
What I can say is we appreciate
Yeah,
that. I
but we
don't
own-
know that it
but
has
we
any
own
bearing
it.
on our,
We own the land under it. I don't believe it pertinent to this particular issue. And I individually have focused more on the side yard variances because they're extreme. But
do we have a motion to entertain your request?
so move, do I need to read the whole thing?
Yes.
I move we approve the request of Joseph K. Buska, Holland Drive, Fremont, Ohio, requesting the following variances after the fact.
within the RL high-density residential district from A, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 36 feet 10 inches or 13 feet 2 inches from the water's edge, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum front yard lakeside setback distance of 50 feet, 0 inches from the water's edge. And from B, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 14 feet 0 inches or 1 foot 0 inches from the west property line, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum side yard setback distance of 15 feet 0 inches from either side property line. And from C, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 9 feet 8 inches or 15 feet 4 inches from the rear or street side property line. Whereas the zoning code requires a minimum setback distance of 25 feet 0 inches from the rear or street side property line. And from D, Article 6, Section 600.03B3, whereas the zoning code requires the Board of Appeals review of any variance located within the front yard, lakeside of the property within the RL high-density residential district in order to approve an existing pergola structure on the property. Note, the landscape framing timber shall be removed from the street right-of-way per the Board of Appeals with the following conditions, that a deck, roof deck not be constructed or used, and that the pavers do not encroach upon the street.
I don't think you say street right away. No one's sure what that is. I think you have to say city property.
City property,
That's what it
advised to city property.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Parsons, second by Mr. Armbruster. And we are going to do a roll call. Okay, Mr. Kozla,
Yes. I think,
Mr. Parsons,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Against the variance.
Mr. Armbruster,
I'm in favor of the variance.
and Ms. Crow.
In favor.
Okay, that motion passes 4-1.
Mr. Buska, thank you for coming down. Sorry
Thank
it took so
you.
long.
Now, besides my neighbors being very flattering, there's obviously.
Well, Mr. Buska, you will be.
So how do we address the concerns of the neighborhood without opposing?
What concerns are those?
Well, there are, specifically, there are boats for sitting on lots.
Again, that's a
my
property,
question.
we have a property enforcement person. If you'll contact Barry Gano, who's a zoning inspector, and
And this is not to impose on somebody else's free will. to do what they want. These things
no,
are-
however,
these are-
we have a code for a purpose, and we want collectively our community to be neat and orderly and attractive because we all live here, and that's why the property enforcement section was.
And my pen or show.
I have it right here. And I agree, there's some property that needs some attention, right down there.
Well, nothing happens overnight anyway. There's some that are bad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next agenda is the Dominic, please. I think it's one got one, it looks like one person that was said. No.
See, there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, we will be on
Want to
this.
sit there 6 foot apart? Your
Your
partner,
minutes.
husband and wife. You can sit as close as you want. We suggest separate chairs, but.
Joe was indicated, okay. All right. So it is 7:14. The City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals will hold a YouTube live stream public hearing on Tuesday, September 15th at 7 o'clock. We are beginning at 7:14. From New Franklin City Hall to hear the following request. 2020 BZA 04, is it Danilo Adamovic, 3235 Greenwich Road, Norton, Ohio 44203, requesting the following variances on behalf of the property located at 6156 Humble Road, New Franklin, Ohio 44216, within the R2 medium density residential district from A, Article 6, Section 600.02, 2 feet 8 inches or 4 inches from the north property line, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum side yard setback distance of 15 feet 0 inches from either side property line, and B, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 2 feet 8 inches or 12 feet and 4 inches from the south property line, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum side yard setback distance of 15 feet 0 inches from either property line within the R2 medium density residential district. Note, the existing dwelling and accessory structure on the property will be raised prior to the construction of proposed new dwelling on the property. A new accessory structure now under construction on the property shall remain. Who's here to speak on behalf of this request? Gonna be you, sir? Okay, I can have you approach the podium. Can they speak in the podium? Okay. All right, if I could have you state your full name and address?
Danilo Adamovic. Address current is 3235 Greenwich Road, Norton, Ohio. And I'm wanting a variance on my property, which is 6156 Humble Road.
Okay. And sir, if I could have you raise your right hand, do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Could you please describe the project and the reason the variance is needed?
The project, we're putting in a new house, and the home that we are buying is 76 feet one direction. We want a 24 foot 2-car garage added onto the actual house itself. That way it's all one uniform piece, the same height, the same, where it all looks like one unit. And
Don't have a picture of the,
yeah, that's,
is that it, or is it more like,
it's just a ranch.
okay,
It's just a style home,
so
one level with a full basement.
just so I know. The front view is gonna look more like that, but with an attached to car garage.
Yes, on the left-hand side, sir.
Thank you.
And if I may, your practical difficulty stems from the fact that it's a prefab home, which is, in other words, it's 76 feet, you're buying it that way, correct?
Yes, sir.
And because of that, it doesn't allow you to make or knock off 2 or 3 feet.
No.
And you, just to be clear, you're raising the home that's there, the existing structure.
It is gonna be demolished, yes.
And-
Everything is demolished, is all getting tore down and it's getting.
There's a couple little outbuildings in the back.
Yes,
that are sort
all
of
of
in
that
disrepair.
is.
However, there's a brand new
Yes, sir.
building, obviously that remains.
Yes, sir. 1,000 foot, it's a 1,000 foot full building. It's on the very far back of the property, so it's almost 600 feet back off the road. And it's over 30 feet from the one border from the neighbor.
Do you have any questions, Mr. Adamovic? Eric, do you have any questions?
I do not.
Thank you, sir. Has anybody had any ex parte communications or need to abstain from hearing this case?
No.
Anybody here to speak for the variance? Anybody here to speak against the variance? Okay. And we're going to shift our discussions to the Supreme Court criteria, whether the property will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be a beneficial use of the property without the variance.
I think the problem can't be.
Whether the variance is substantial.
I would suggest it's not.
I would agree. I don't think it is.
Yeah, I don't think it is either.
Whether the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered or adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment. It sounds like we're putting on
I
a
think
newer, nicer house.
To the contrary, I think a significant improvement.
I agree.
Yeah.
Whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services.
I do not believe so.
Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction.
That's always a difficult factor. I don't know why the Supreme Court put it in, because everybody has some sort of implied knowledge.
If I may speak on that,
Sure.
I grew up there. That was my parents' property. It was 2 separate lots. So I've been trying to do this project for almost 2 years now. I had to get it rezoned into 1 lot. So I can actually put the dwelling or the garage pool building on the back so we can remove all the contents that we're keeping. That way we can get rid of everything. So that actual property has been in my family for well over 45 years.
Thank you. Whether the problem can be resolved by some manner other than the granting of a variance. Only leaving the existing house there, but it's going to be.
Well, this is a prefab, so
Right.
that prevents it.
I think the alternative, I mean, you could build a 1-car garage, but then you've got a car sitting outside. And, in my opinion, having them in the garage is more palatable than having them sit out, so.
So it could be resolved with something smaller, but doesn't make quite as much sense. Okay. Whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of zoning requirement, and whether substantial justice would be done by granting the variance.
I believe it will.
All right, I likewise, I agree with that. All right, do we have a motion?
Motions are always made in the positive. This is motion 2020 BZA 04, and I'm gonna screw your name up.
Danilo,
Denleo, okay.
Adamovic.
Adamovic, okay. Not too bad. 3235 Greenwich Road, Norton, Ohio, 44203, requesting the following variances on behalf of property located at 6156 Humboldt Road in Franklin, Ohio, 44216 within the R2 medium density residential district. First of all, A, Article 6, Section 600.02, 2 feet 8 inches or 12 feet 4 inches from the property line, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum yard setback of 15 feet 0 inches from either side property line. And secondly, B, Article 6, Section 600.02, 600.02 of 2 feet 8 inches, 12 feet 4 inches from the south property line, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum side yard setback distance of 15 feet 0 inches from either side property line within the R2 medium density residential district. Note, existing dwelling and accessory structure on the property shall be raised prior to the construction of the proposed dwelling on the property. A new accessory structure now under construction of the property shall remain.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Armbruster. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second by Mr. Roberts. Before I take the roll call, just briefly, I wanted to mention there is a letter to read into the record from the city engineer. I don't know if you want to do that before I do the final roll call.
Sure. Okay, we have that. This letter is from city engineer Kevin Noble regarding 6156 Humboldt Road, modular home construction. Review of project has been complete. The project involves renovation an existing residential home and installation of a new 30-foot wide modular home. Following is a comment as they relate to stormwater management and erosion control for this project. 1. Downspouts are to be discharged towards the roadside ditch. This office reserves the right to make additional review comments based on comments that may be made in the upcoming zoning appeals meeting. And up to that time, the permit has been issued by the zoning administration. Please contact me if you have any questions. 0526-2714. Kevin.
So should you understand that?
Yes, sir, I do. If I can speak on that, and the actual quotes in some of the papers that I did present, if you look through that, it actually will show you that the gutters are going to be discharged to the actual front ditch itself. So it's not just going to go to the actual front yard. I think it's gonna be out, you know,
Thank you.
Thank you.
should be very well set up.
Okay, we did have a motion by Mr. Armbruster, a second by Mr. Roberts. Roll call. Mr. Kozla,
Yes, I think
Mr. Parsons,
we're going to build on that lot because of the fact that he's improving it. He's taking down the structure that should be there now. And it's a matter of inches. I think he should be able to build.
okay, thank you, Mr. Kozla. Mr. Parsons,
Yes,
Mr. Roberts,
In favor of the variance.
Mr. Armbruster,
I'm in favor of the variance.
and Ms. Crowe.
In favor.
Okay, motion passes 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
thank you.
Good luck to you very much. We'll have a good evening.
You do the same. Thank you.
Stryker or
I think Stryker.
Probably.
Oh, yeah, they are. That's correct. Well, let me go see if they're,
Thank you.
oh, it's all part of the
So part of the end. You're on the end.
Who are we bringing
Stryker. Have a, seat there. For someone else with you? You can sit there. Several of the neighbors can sit.
I think we're just gonna wait just a couple of minutes so we can get started at 7, close to 7:30. We might lose the three in our little time hole here.
One of those things.
I think I can at least start off by reading the notice of public hearing. I'll read slow. Notice of public hearing. The City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals will hold a YouTube live stream public hearing on Tuesday, September 5th, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. from the New Franklin City Hall to hear the following request. 2020 BZA 05, William D. and Lana R. Stryker, 5436 Dusty Road, New Franklin, Ohio 44319. Requesting the following variance from the R3 High Density Residential District from A, Article 8, Section 800.01 B2A of 152 square feet in order to construct a 24-foot by 48-foot, total 1,152 square feet detached accessory building. Whereas the zoning code allows a maximum permitted size of 1,000 square feet for a detached accessory building on parcels of 2 acres or less in size within the R3 High Density Residential District. Is anybody here to speak in favor, or who's here to speak on the request for Mr. Stryker?
Say that again.
Who's here to speak on the request for Mr. Stryker?
Who's Mr. Stryker?
Who's Mr. Stryker? Okay, come on up, sir. Thank you. Come on up. I'm gonna have you come up to the podium and we're gonna swear you in.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. I wasn't exactly clear at 7:30 tonight. But can you state your full name and your address for the record?
William D. Stryker, 4536 West Road, Franklin, Ohio, 44319.
All right, if I could have you raise your right hand. You solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief. Okay. If you could describe your project and state the reason the variance is needed.
Well, full barn back my property. And
Mr. Chairperson, I'm having trouble hearing.
So we do have a couple people who are appearing online. Can you speak up?
okay. I'm sorry, I'm kind of soft.
You could probably take the mask off if you're 6 feet apart too.
And I have no opposition if he wants to speak, step a little closer. We can all hear him here.
Yep.
Yeah, that way Eric and Barry can hear as well.
Yeah, I have a lot of stuff I'd like to put into a barn and keep it inside. I have woodworking equipment that I basically have to move everything out of my current garage to be able to get to it and use it. And I'd like to be able to store everything indoors and not have to move around. Constantly moving to a project.
Okay, so my question would be, what is the practical difficulty you have with needing that extra 150 square feet?
I don't really understand practical difficulty, but I feel I would almost like to go bigger than that, but I'm trying to keep it close to what the city guidelines are. And still be able to set up my equipment and be able to do it. Between lawnmowers, tractor, just the equipment I have in my garage.
Sir, our code allows 1,000 square feet. You asked for one slightly bigger.
Yes, sir.
Is there a reason why it's slightly bigger? I mean, in some way it's constructed, or why is it?
I mean, it's still 24 by 48. It gives me enough room to be able to pull a vehicle easily into one bay.
Well, it would seem to me, if I'm wrong, please say so, that a 24 by 48 building is a kind of a uniform size. If you construct something, you might pick a size like that, 24 by 48, or 20 by 40, but not, if you can envision 1,000 square feet, I'm not sure how you do that exactly with a building.
If I may. Sure. Not your perspective. For example, I think my math wasn't my strong suit, but if it were 24 by 46, I think that would be 1,004 square feet. And so.
It'd still be over.
Well, but
It'd still be years.
less significant. I mean, it could be, I mean, there's no magic to 48. I mean, unless you're buying a prefabricated structure that just happens to be.
Right. And I mean, it just allows you to set them up on equal center. I think it would be a little bit more room inside there. We would want to keep things from being outside.
You know, for the record, I can state, having been on this board for a while, we've allowed a lot of variances in the realm of 10% or 12%.
This one I think is 15.2%.
15.2. We've allowed an awful lot of variances in that area.
And realistically, and maybe can see the building, his neighbor to the north can see the building. Really, most people probably want to be able to see it.
When I went back and looked around, it's sort of hidden on three sides, actually. I wish.
I think Randy Norris owns the property there.
You're his neighbor.
Who would have the neighbor? I was gonna say, has anybody had any ex parte communications or have to abstain from the striker case?
No.
No? Okay.
Nope.
Sir, are you here to speak for the variance?
I'm bored.
Okay. Simple
He said,
and to the
I can
point.
put some stuff in there.
But before we go with you putting his stuff in his garage, can I have you state your name and your address?
My name is Gary Hoover, and I live at 4524 Dusty's Road, next door.
All right, and Mr. Hoover, if I can have you raise your right hand. You solemnly affirm the testimony you are about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and ability.
Yes, it is.
All right, if you could please state for the record why you are in favor of the variance request.
Why? Because I could use some of that space. I got a little shed out back, and it's right to the door.
Okay, so just in the grand scheme of location, where are you located as it relates to Mr.
I'm
Striker's property?
I'm the next house east of it,
Okay.
or north, to be
So
sure.
if you're standing in the road looking at his house, you're on the left.
On the right,
Okay, I think
right.
because you have a corner lot, if I recall correctly?
Martin Norris.
Okay.
So you're on the right, so you are the one,
Yes.
to the extent any neighbors can see it, you have
I
the
got
clearest view of it.
Yes.
So if we're looking at this house here, then this is you.
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay.
From here. It's good.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Hoover?
Let me go back and try one more time with Mr. Stryker,
Okay.
if I may.
Yes.
Did you buy a prefab kit, or you do this from scratch?
Right now, I'm talking with Rocksteady Builders. They're out of Iowa Country.
Did they give you a quote for 24 by 48 or a sample? Did they give you a sample of something that's 24 by 46?
No, because I didn't ask. This, this is a set of drawings that they brought me later after I read it.
Okay.
Here to look at this, you're welcome to. Or I can make copies of this.
Well, that's fine. I think.
So let me ask you, Mr. Stryker, would you be willing to pursue a quote for an accessory building that is 24 by 46 feet?
I suppose if I had to make that. I'd really, this gives you a little bit more area. I have woodworking too, most of my life. Really, I've never had any place.
There are, I'm looking at what, unfortunately, I think, the front elevation of the building, and there are 3 garage doors,
3 garage doors.
16 foot and then 2 10 foot doors.
And honestly, when I said that in, I was considering doing 10 by 10 doors. I'm considering dropping it to 10 foot high instead of 12 foot high. 8 foot tall. And that way it kind of lowers the overall appearance of the building. Doesn't sit up so high. But it would still be under the 20 feet of the 12 foot.
I don't think that's a real issue. Just the size. That's what the variance is for.
Right. There are already buildings like right down the street.
Well, there
That's 3 doors down behind.
may be a lot of reasons for that.
And I don't know at that time. I don't know how long.
I would say that, I don't think I would be able to tell the difference between a 24 by 46 or 24 by 48 if I were to walk up to the building. I'm not that perceptive. Having said that, though, it's still, in my view at least, it's a pretty significant. Not taking anything away from what you said, Mr. Armbruster, but it's 15%.
Point of discussion. Let's discuss it. We can do that. Mr. Roberts, any thoughts on this?
Well, if we do the math, in order to comply, it would have to be 20 by 48 if we were to one dimension there. But it is over what we allow, but it is not significantly over what we allow typically.
Any thoughts, Mr. Paul?
Is the building going to be insulated?
Not initially, but I probably will.
Yeah, what amenities are you gonna have in there also? Water, no, heat, electricity?
Electricity.
Just electricity?
Yes.
Okay.
Mr.
Is
Striker?
this just being used for storage, general purposes, or do you have an RV that you're gonna put in there or what?
The reason I wanted.
Because that's a lot of area. I have a big garage, so I know.
The only reason I wanted to keep it that is if I could work. I got enough room back of that.
What is the reason you chose this size pole building?
It gives me more room on either side of the door. I got a full-size Dodge with an 8-foot bed or something, to be able to work. And still have room to walk around.
But yeah, because I see the 10 by 16 foot door. That's usually for farm equipment, you know.
Correct, that's why
Yeah.
kind of rescinded that, I think I'm going back to the 16 by 8 and 10 foot wide and 10 foot wide. That's gonna drop my roof line down a little bit.
But you're going to have electricity, right?
And we'll
Okay. Because I'm sure you're gonna have the doors on a remote so you can, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
One other thing, Mr. Stryker, whenever we allow any kind of structure this size, we always put a condition on it that no commercial activity will be allowed now or in the future.
Right.
By you or your neighbor.
Pardon me?
I said, by you or your neighbor.
We only get to keep an eye on it. Any additional questions?
None further.
We should have some discussion with Mr. Stryker if he wants to amend his motion. I don't know. And I always feel it's up to us to try to give him some idea what we might be doing so that he doesn't have to come running back here again. In other words, if we turn him down and he's got to come back and start all over, I don't think we're doing a good service to him.
Well, can we discuss the factors, if we can get an idea?
Sure,
And then he can just,
let's discuss that.
all right, let me just put on the record very briefly, Mr. Gano, it looks like we have another letter from engineering, city engineer, is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
I'm gonna go ahead and read some of the records, September 8th, 2020, regarding 4536 Dusty Road, Pole Barn. A review of the site plan for the above referenced project has been completed. This project involves the construction of a 24-foot by 48-foot detached pole barn structure. No comments on this project, but they relate to stormwater management and erosion control. This office reserves the right to make additional review comments based on comments that may be made in the upcoming City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. And up until that time, and up until the time that permits has been issued by the zoning administration, please contact me if you have any questions. Very truly yours, Kevin Noble. All right, so Mr. Stryker, we're just gonna engage in some conversation here amongst the board members to see where we're at and if potentially an amendment may be needed. So whether the property will yield a reasonable return or whether there can be beneficial use of the property without the variance, I think that there can be beneficial use of the property as it's in use right now.
I agree.
I agree.
Right. Whether the variance is substantial.
I don't think so. That's my opinion.
Well, I will agree that percentages are percentages. It's 150 feet. So whatever you call it, it's 2 feet, essentially, of width. So I think taking everything into account, the location, the fact that the neighbor supports it, the fact that it's pushed back into a pretty secluded area, I don't have a problem with the size.
Whether the essential character of the neighborhood will be substantially altered or adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment.
Well, we agree.
Yeah, I think so too. Our neighbor would agree as well. Whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services.
No.
Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction.
How long have you lived at this residence?
And I think this kind of goes back to what Mr. Armbruster and I said before. We're aware as property owners, there are zoning requirements and restrictions. We're probably not, as well versed in what the specifics are, but whether the problem can be resolved by some manner other than the granting of a variance. Yes, a smaller structure.
Yeah.
Whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of the zoning requirement and whether substantial justice would be done by granting the variance. I can tell you, I'm torn on this one because I think we have the zoning requirements for a reason. I think something that comes up with the board a lot is people constantly say, well, this person did this person did that. So, clearly people are either doing things without our consent and their neighbors don't know it, or we're granting a lot of, case by case variances, which is what our job is. But I don't know that substantial justice would not be done if we decided to not.
Just for the record, I believe this portion of the zoning code was changed 2 years ago, Barry?
Pardon me?
This section of the zoning code, was it amended 2 years ago to go from 800 to 1,000?
Yes, that is correct. Actually, it's in 2019.
Okay, for the record, if the zoning commission had come to me as a member of this BZA, I would have recommended they go to 1,200 feet. Because it's more of a uniform standard, more of a uniform size, and I think it's more of a size that other communities allow. Is that correct, Eric?
Well,
I can't answer that for sure.
that can be kind of iffy, and I've always been an advocate. I think that buildings should be sized in relation to the property size.
Okay.
I think that would be probably a wiser way to go. You know, obviously, a smaller property should have a smaller building.
What's the property size here? You know that off the top of your
How many acres you have?
100.
So it's just less than an acre. Less than an acre.
3/4 acre. Eric, do you have any comments on this one?
Well, I guess we could ask, Mr. Stryker, are you willing to reduce the size of the building to comply with the zoning code?
I guess I would prefer to stay with my variance and try and get the 24 by 48.
Gonna roll the dice, huh?
To lose. 2 feet? I don't really see it as being that big of a overage over, especially where it's at on the property. You know, and I get if you were in a more normal neighborhood, you know, if you were blocking somebody's view or changing somebody's view, it doesn't impact anybody really. My neighbor is really about the only person that could see it on a normal basis. The neighbor north of him would really have to, hey, he can see it, but you know, he's also got some trees along that side. I don't know how well of a view he would have of it, but I don't see it as being that big of a overage over the 1,000 square feet.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, that's why I came here. That's why I did ask for it.
Sure, he's rolling the dice instead. I like it. All right, anything additional from Mr. Stryker or Mr. Hoover? Questions? I said, do you have any questions? A question about questions.
I'm telling you, I'm reading, that is a problem. I don't have any.
Do we have a motion on the issue?
I'll make a motion that we approve request 2020 BZA 05 of William D. and Lana R. Stryker, Police 536 Dusty Road, Franklin, Ohio 439, requesting the following variance within the R3 high density residential district from A, Article 8, Section 800.01 B2A of 152 square feet in order to construct a 24 by 48 foot 1,152 square feet detached accessory building. Whereas the zoning code allows a maximum permitted size of 1,000 square feet for a detached accessory building on parcels of 2 acres or less in size within the R3 high density residential district, with condition that no commercial activity can be conducted there.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Parsons. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, second by Ms. Crowe. All righty. Let's do a roll call. Mr. Kozla.
I don't think anybody's gonna notice 192 square feet. And not only that, it's somewhat in a secluded area. I think I would say yes, give them the variance.
Okay, Mr. Parsons.
Yes.
Mr. Roberts.
In favor of the variance.
Mr. Armbruster.
I'm in favor of the variance.
And Ms. Crowe.
In favor.
Okay, that motion passes 5-0.
Rolling the dice pays off.
You had a little nervous.
I'm sorry.
You were a little nervous?
I've never done this before. I
You
really
did
did.
well, you
I
won.
just wanted to upset.
Good luck, thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later. Now, that's good. Or if I have legal buildings, then they would have to get.
Mr. Cano?
You know, what does he do next?
It needs to come in and get his zoning permit, which will probably be Thursday. That'll be ready.
Oh, okay, so to come back here, how much is this zoning permit?
It is based on 10 cents per square foot.
Okay.
So it'll be what? 150, no. Let me, I'm hold on. How much was it? 1152? Couldn't remember.
1,052, yeah.
115.20. $115.20. Make a check payable to the city of New Franklin.
Can I do cash?
We're ready for you on Thursday morning.
And then I still have to go to Summit County to get an actual permit, or the builder would have to do that?
That's correct. You need a building permit as well.
My experience with building is
Okay, there.
I don't want to. I'm too old.
I consider doing it myself. I haven't really built it, but I really just don't want to take the time to do it. It'll be 3 months or 6 months instead of indefinitely.
Yeah.
Good
Time
luck.
is worth something. Good luck.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.
guys.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
It looks like we have 9 minutes before we can start the other one. Yes, it was legally advertised.
Going back maybe 8, 9, 10 years ago, it stopped. All I have to do is add 60. Yeah. 30. And then 100, and then 60.
Well, the solution is the easiest. I don't know. This would discuss this.
Well, I think we're generally speaking right now.
You know, like lots, they're not, our code doesn't prevent us from granting. It says that they're discouraged. Not sure what discouraged means. If you look at the definition of discouraged, it doesn't really go to this. But in parcels of this size, it's difficult to not have flag lots on it. I mean, if you own 50 acres, finding someone to buy 50 acres is much more difficult than finding someone that could buy 10 acres if it were flag lot. And I don't know what the opposition to flag lots in general is. I mean, what's the problem?
Barry, what's the opposition in general to flag lots?
Honestly, I don't know. I think maybe what the thought is in some of the discussions with the planning commission in the past, and that would not be most of the gentlemen that's seated there now. This would be previous commission members. I think the worry has always been having a home behind another home. And if you have some sort of a neighbor dispute or whatever, I mean, you basically have a house, one guy's front yard is into the other guy's backyard. So I think that's kind of what the gist of it is. I don't know if it's a real strong case. I think maybe I couldn't quite make out what Mr. Parsons said, but I think what he's trying to say, but Roy, if it's based on size, correct me if I'm wrong on that. Is that what you were trying to say? If the bigger it is, the less of an issue? Is that what you were?
Actually, what my point was that I really do think you need to look at each one of these separately in the circumstances that surround it, rather than to say we don't do flag lots. We're just not going to approve any flag lots. Why not? Now, the code does require 120 feet. I think it's 120 feet.
In that district.
120 feet at the road and 120 feet at the building line, which could be done by the Colecas keeping another acre, just over an acre, 1.057. The reason that Mr. Coleca said was that the buyer needed all of the acreage to get a yeah, and I don't know that that's intended to call him today, didn't, but I know that my son has borrowed my farm, Euro, and things like that, with less than 40. So, I mean, I just, if you look at the code and you talk about preserving the spirit, the best interest of the property owner, the general vicinity, and all of those things, I just don't see sort of the universal opposition to flag lots is.
Well, that's a good point.
I mean, these people have lived here forever. And they wanna stay.
35 years.
But they don't wanna maintain, they've got, I mean, I'm sure you've all been there, but they have horse stable. A lot of work.
There used to be a tree farm.
I don't know.
I thought it used to be kids who cut down Christmas trees. But maybe not.
There's no trees there, well, I mean,
No,
there are
they're
trees.
gone now.
Yeah.
I was there today.
It's quite an operation.
But they've got also a number of big buildings back there, which
None of which remain on the property that they are keeping.
in other words, the farmer's buying all this, he states he needs so much land.
Right.
But I'm looking,
Well, he says he needs so much land to get his financing. And I don't know whether.
does that include farmable land or, I don't know.
Good question.
But if they added 60 feet, they'd still have 180 feet of frontage.
There's, if you went, if this was 120, there'd still be, 180 left of frontage, and he wouldn't have to take it back any further. Well, in my opinion, they don't have to take it back to the building. Because after the building, the code says at the street and at the building. And
Well, is the building line over on the right with the proposed 7.26 acres?
I'm sorry,
Is the building line over here, Joe? Where the
you know what, I don't know the definition of building line, I think that was, where is the building line defined as the minimum setback, front yard setback, or is it the building?
In this particular case, it is 70 feet back from the road right-of-way line.
Okay.
That is the minimum building line. Then they're back.
60 by 70. Yeah. I mean, there may be a million reasons.
I believe the surveyor is going to be here tonight too to address the board on this matter. So,
Mr.
It's always,
Yeah, forever.
well, I could get a lot out of that. Yeah, I'm not talking about something.
Well, you know what, I can,
That's good. Fine.
I don't get a quarter.
I'm trying it in my head, so. But IOU's gonna be worth something.
You can have a seat at this table.
Hello. All right, it's about 7:58, so I will read this notice of public hearing slowly, given the first notice of public hearing. The City of New Franklin Board of Zoning Appeals will hold a YouTube live stream public hearing on Tuesday, September 15th, 2020, at 8 p.m. from the New Franklin City Hall for the following requests. 20 BZA 06, Donald R. and Bridget H. Is it Kalaka? Kalaka, thank you. Kalaka. Co-trustees, 2959 Surface Road, New Franklin, Ohio, 44216, requesting the following variances within the R1 Low Density Rural Residential District. From A, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 60 feet 0 inches or 60 feet 0 inches of proposed lot frontage, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum lot frontage of 120 feet 0 inches. And from B, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 60 feet 0 inches or 60 feet 0 inches proposed lot width at the building line at a point determined 3 feet 0 inches back from the street right-of-way line. Whereas the zoning code requires a minimum lot width at the building line at a point determined 70 feet 0 inches back from the street right-of-way line of 120 feet 0 inches at the R1 low density rural residential district. Variances are required to permit permanent driveway access for a newly created flag lot of 7.26 acres containing an existing dwelling split from an overall parcel size of 53.9 acres. A residual parcel of 46.61 acres shall be sold to an adjoining neighbor. Who's here to speak on behalf of this request, Mr. Coloca?
Yes,
Okay, if I could have you stand up. State your name and address.
Don Coloca, 2959 Service Road, New Franklin, Ohio.
Okay, I'm gonna place you under oath. You solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony you're about to give is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and belief.
I do.
All right, Mr. Coloca, if you could please describe your project and why a variance is needed.
You see what the size of the lot that they were requiring 120 feet. When I purchased it, I've lived in Ohio here for 42 years. And when I purchased this property roughly 35 years ago, it was my impression that the zoning at that point was 50 foot of frontage. Therefore, down the road, if I wanted to, I could have split the property up, and sold the parcels if I wanted to. We decided to keep it as a farm and didn't think anything of it. Over the years, zoning has changed, and didn't think anything of it. Now comes a time that it's ready for us to retire. I have some health issues, and I can't expect my wife to do all the work on the farm herself. And so it's time for us to move on to something different. And as much as we hate to sell it, I really felt that I'd die on this property. We really love the area and the property. We built the house with the idea that when retirement came, we would be able to, it's all on one floor, the bedroom, the bathroom, laundry, everything is on one floor. It's not a ranch, but everything is on one floor. Everything that we would need. It's time, I don't want to, if we're forced to sell the house with the farm, then, we're gonna be left out in the cold as far as trying to find someplace else to live, to the surrounding, the people, the neighbors that we know. These are old friends for, 35 years, 40 years. And, as I said, the individual that's interested in purchasing this property, is only interested in the land. He, doesn't need the house, he has a home, and, needs as much land as possible to be able to qualify for farm credit for lending. I guess that's about it,
First, has anybody had any ex parte communications? Or anybody that we need to abstain from hearing this case?
Nope.
Could I speak?
We'll get right with you, okay? All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Coloca?
I do. Although it may be better answered by Mr. Holman, but, the code requires you to have 120 feet of, today, 120 feet of frontage at the street and 120 feet of frontage at the building line, which is 70 feet back. And so it added 60 feet to your proposed plan, 70 feet back, which I think is 4,200 square feet, tenth of an acre. You could comply with the code. You follow me?
I understand what you're saying, yes. The thing that I'm concerned about is farm credit. I've got nothing to do with them, and, they're stretching this as it is.
And I
understand.
I'm not a farm credit expert, but 4,200 square feet seems de minimis on a 46.61 acre parcel. But farm credit be what it is, right?
Who is the farmer who's going to buy your land?
I'm sorry?
Who is the farmer?
Next door, Daly is the last name. Daly, this property actually is joint mine.
Okay. I live on Taylor Road, so I just want to make sure that guy not farming my land And that would be, you know what I'm saying, it's conflict of interest.
No, no.
Okay.
Other questions for Mr. Clover
I know
right
who
now?
you're
We need to
talking
hear
about.
from Mr.
I've been there 47 years.
Have you?
Yes, I have the only farm left on that area, right on Taylor.
Eric, do you have any questions for Mr. Calotra, or can we move on to Mr. Moyne, and we can follow back up with questions momentarily?
The neighbor who's to purchase that land, does he have frontage on Surface Road?
Yes, he does.
And which direction on Surface Road from your?
Next property, right next door.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So if you
it's a
combine
joint
that,
property.
You're looking at the property to the left. You're facing the property to the road, it's immediate left.
Okay, thank you. So will he have 120 feet then eventually?
Yes, he's got 300 feet.
Okay,
When they were sold off, they were 300 feet each section was a 300-foot lot. On that lot, 300 foot of frontage.
thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, sir. We might have a couple more questions for you.
Sure.
We're gonna hear from, Mr. Moyne. All right. You know, you can stay right there because we've got a couple people who are listening in on the computer, so I'm just gonna have you state your name and your address for the record.
My name is Joseph H. Moyne Jr. I'm a registered land surveyor.
Okay, and sir, what is your address?
17175 Gale House Road, Doylestown, Ohio.
Okay, and if I could have you raise your right hand. You swear to affirm the testimony you're going to give here today is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and ability.
Yes, sir.
Okay. What would you like to say on behalf of this request?
Well, I would like to point out to the board that, the plan here. What the Calotas are proposing is not uncommon to the area. If you look immediately south of this proposed 60-foot wide access to Surface Road, and just about 150 foot to the west of the proposed 60-foot wide strip, there's a 60-foot wide strip that's giving access to not only the house adjacent to it, which is owned by the road, but also to the lands to the south of the road, the main acreage to the south of the road.
Isn't that undeveloped street you're referring to?
Yes, an undeveloped street. I have no further comment of the survey wise about the property, but I thought I'd point that out to the board.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Moyne? All right, I don't believe that there was anything additional to read into the record. Is that correct, Mr. Gano?
Nothing else. If this is indeed approved, city engineer Kevin Noble will do the final review on it, as will myself. So that comes at a later date.
I have another question. How did you come up with this? How did you come up with the 60 feet?
Again, I was just trying to get I was under the impression it was only 50 feet that I needed. So that when in looking over some of the, across the street, seeing that was 60 feet, I thought that that would be suitable to stay in that line.
So if you had known it was 120 feet, you would have probably done this differently.
I probably would have come here and requested the same thing, but that's how I came, the same as I am now. But I probably would have asked for 50.
Okay. Thank you.
Could I have one more?
Yes, sir.
Of course, this is New Franklin, but I come from Wayne County. Well, I live in Wayne County, and the Wayne County Commissioners have a provision in their subdivision regulation. I'm just putting this up for you. But they have a provision in their subdivision regulation that was added not too long ago, and it dealt with properties that are 40 acres or greater. And the provision allowed to break out a parcel around the building. And the purpose of that was basically for mortgage purposes, so that the landowner didn't have to mortgage the whole farm and all the buildings. And in that case, then a parcel could be created around the buildings, around the dwelling, and with a 40-foot wide easement going from the road to the area of the house or the building. So it wasn't an ownership to the road, it was an easement from the road to the building. So again, this is New Franklin, but I just want to point that out, that there was so many problems in Wayne County on large farms where landowners would lose the whole property if there was, a situation where they couldn't make their mortgage payment.
Thank you,
That's what I
John.
have.
Right, just for the record, there's nobody else here to speak in favor of or against the variance. So unless opposition at this time, we can review factors. All right. Whether the property will yield a reasonable return or whether it can be a beneficial use of the property without the variance. Like to have. Whether the variance is substantial.
Relative to the code requirement, 60 feet.
Yeah, relative, I agree, relative to the code requirement, as part of the 20 feet, 60 feet is on that.
Whether the essential character of the neighborhood would alter or join properties would suffer a substantial detriment.
I agree.
Likewise. Whether the variance would adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. Whether the property owner purchased the property with knowledge of the zoning restriction. I think he testified he wasn't aware that it would be, this requirement would be imposed upon him, and then through the years, as the code has changed, that has impacted why he's here today, or led him here today. Whether the problem can be resolved by some manner other than the grant of variance.
Obviously, we talked about it quickly. With the property, the 120 feet, I guess we didn't discuss the possibility of an easement either. Have we talked about an easement?
Well, certainly, that thought crossed my mind, but I thought, well, that's not an issue that I think I deal with. I assume you're gonna grant an easement. Do you envision the buyer putting in a new driveway because part of it is on the property that you're reserving, or you're just gonna have an easement to allow him to?
Yeah, because see, it works that way for both of us. Coming in the entranceway is mine, okay, and would remain mine. And then because the driveway has some twists and turns in it, it goes to his, it goes on, which would be his property. And then, what I am planning on doing is, you see, there's a right of way going down through that, Dominion has. And, I would continue to, just follow that roadway around instead of going up and around the barns, going to the house. I would, hang a right and stay on the right of way and go around, and it would be just a short, lane that I'd have to cut in to get to my house. I mean, it's really very, very easy.
Yeah, I went that way. I thought that's how we got to your
Okay.
So you right away. We're
So he would come up, he wouldn't go this way.
You have
Is that right there?
you have 60 feet of useless land there anyhow, because of a pipeline, right?
That's right.
Gas pipeline. He has 60 feet, I see on the drawing here, that can't be used for anything because of a pipeline running.
That's right. And that's the lane that I would use for, that's the right of way that's the Dominion.
So that's the road that I would use to be able to get around to the house. And my right away, I already have, gas has already been run there, the electric is already in underground, everything is in, that's gonna stay the same. None of that is gonna change. I don't ever see us getting water out there.
I hope not.
All right, whether the
But he
variance.
could run that easement right down the pipeline if you want, and it's not gonna affect anybody because you can't do anything with it anyhow.
Whether the variance preserves the spirit and intent of the zoning requirement, whether substantial justice is done by granting the variance.
Never shy to offer my opinion.
Go for it.
I think the fact of the matter is that this house 35 years ago,
Roughly 35 years ago. Yes.
and there are very few people in the city of New Franklin that's going to know anything has changed. There isn't, everybody that lived, all of these buildings have been here forever.
Yeah.
And you have lived there for 35 years. You're not, it doesn't mean that they can't change something or they can't build something. The specific grant of this variance request, in my opinion, is consistent with the code in this particular case. And I cite, as I did earlier, the general purpose of the code and our section 200.03 Board of Zoning Appeals, section E2, variances this is the Board of Zoning Appeals authority section. To authorize upon appeal in specific cases such variance in terms of the zoning resolution as will not be contrary to public interest, wherein owing to special circumstances, a literal enforcement would result in unnecessary hardship, and so that the spirit of the zoning code will be observed and substantial justice done. I don't know what the opposition to this would be. Someone can explain that to me.
What's the hardship? I'm not trying to be difficult.
No, I understand that. In my opinion, the hardship is that Mr. and Mrs. Collected cannot manage this property any longer as it certainly exists.
Okay, what's the hardship to making the driveway 120 feet? That's not a hardship to them, it's a hardship to someone who's not even here. It's fine. Right?
Not granting the variance is a hardship.
So it's my understanding that if he doesn't want, if it's not conforming and it doesn't work for his farming funding essentially, then he's not interested in the property.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, so if that's the case, then you would have to sell everything, including the home in which you reside.
Exactly. And as I say, it's a nice home. We it didn't get built in a year, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, it took a long time to build that house. And, we love it. We'd like to stay there, and I can't imagine us finding, for the same amount of money, finding a house like that,
So the hardship is, you know, the requisite amount of acreage for him, it could jeopardize the deal and you could ultimately lose. Okay.
Well, yeah, and for May, section 300.04 variance review currently reads, standards for approval of variance. There are practical difficulties carrying out the strict letter of this zoning code regarding our height, parking, and sign requirements. Yard that we're talking about. Board of Zoning Appeals shall weigh the interests of the owner against those of the neighboring property owners and the community as a whole, and may grant a variance only after finding adequate evidence that most of the following tests of the existence of practical difficulties apply. I think of the requirements of the practical difficulty have been met. That's the Supreme Court's visions that we are to adhere to. So in my opinion, he's met the standards for granting variance.
Anything additional? All right, is there a motion?
I will make a motion. Can the chairperson make a motion? All right. In the affirmative, 2020 BZA, Donald R. and Bridget H. Laka. Co-trustees, 2959 Surface Road, New Franklin, Ohio, 44216, requesting the following variances from the R1 Low Density Rural Residential District. From A, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 60 feet 0 inches or 60 feet 0 inches of proposed lot frontage, whereas the zoning code requires a minimum lot frontage of 120 feet 0 inches. And from B, Article 6, Section 600.02 of 60 feet 0 inches or 60 feet 0 inches proposed lot width at the building line at a point determined 70 feet 0 inches from the street right of way, back from the street right of way line. Whereas the zoning code requires a minimum lot width at the building line at a point determined 70 feet 0 inches back from the street right of way line, 120 feet 0 inches within the R1 low density rural residential district. Variances are required to permit permanent driveway access for a newly created flag lot of 7.26 acres containing an existing dwelling split from an overall parcel size of 53.9 acres. A residual parcel of 46.61 acres shall be sold to an adjoining neighbor.
Okay, we do have a motion by Ms. Crowe. Do we have a second?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, a second by Mr. Roberts. Okay, we shall do a roll call. Mr. Kozla.
There's another point of, just one more point of discussion.
Yeah.
Mr. Parsons.
Okay.
Have you considered, I mean, have you considered, first of all, it would have been great if the proposed buyer were here to help us understand the issue with respect to his financing. Secondly, the thought, and I don't know that this is 100% accurate, but I think the code, if you maintained another 120 feet, not the 60 feet, so if you reserved for yourself another 60 feet back to 70 feet, there's a provision in the code that has some kind of odd language that I've read a couple times and can't seem to understand about the minimum building setback line. Barry, you familiar with that? I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but
Oh, you be on the, if you look on the matrix on page 31, under Article 6.
no, but not so much the matrix, but on page 34 of the code, 6B, so it's, it talks about required setbacks on a flag lot / irregularly shaped lot. And if you take a minute and read that, I don't know that in this instance, the minimum building setback is 70 feet, is my point. Because it seems to say you add to that.
Okay. Let's see, minimum block volume is not possible within, okay, due to lot dimensions, the building line shall be revised to include a setback equal to the minimum side yard width or equal to the proposed building height, which is greater. I think, Mr. Parsons, what we're dealing with there is with an accessory structure that would be nearby there. If you kind of read that carefully about a building height and that.
Okay.
Where it says the proposed building height, whichever is greater from the point where the minimum lot width at the building line could be achieved. I mean, we're talking about, we're not doing with any buildings close to where we're doing this right now.
It's supplemental district standards, required yards, regular lots, so I don't know.
It has an accessory buildings on flag or regularly shaped lots shall be set back from the property line per section 800.01A5 for side and rear setbacks. But once again, we're talking about accessory buildings. And then it talks about as far back as the front wall of the principal building, which would be the house, which is quite a ways from there. I don't know if we're on the same page on that or not, but
And I, this may be out of order.
Oh, no, please.
I understand that. In thinking through this, it would be helpful if we continued this so that the buyer could come and explain to us what he's indicated to you. Is there urgency on completing this sale?
This was supposed to be, I was late in coming down here as far as getting the paperwork in to be able to, and so I blame that on myself. But we were scheduled to be last week and we moved it up to this week. He only has 90 days for, approval.
To protect his interest rate.
All he had is 90 days. And listen, it doesn't matter to me how much frontage I've got. You know what I mean? I'm trying to sell the property and be able to keep it going.
Sure.
You know, that's my objective here, you know? When the bank wants certain things, you try to comply with what they want in order to be able to get the loan. You know, and so, here you're jumping over this table and that table in order to try to satisfy them. And that's what I'm going through here, you see?
Understand.
Motion, so, there's been a motion and a second, I don't think we have any additional discussions.
Yeah, we had a second by Mr. Roberts. I don't know, is there any more discussion?
I don't believe so.
So we can go ahead with a roll call then?
Yes.
Okay, roll call. Mr. Kozla.
I guess your adjustments have to be made? No.
You said no, Mr. Kozla?
Is that,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
He's asking you, are you saying yes or no?
what's that again, Ray?
Are you saying yes
Yes
or
or
no?
No.
You said no? Okay. Mr. Parsons.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Roberts.
Yes.
Mr. Armbruster.
No,
I'm sorry.
no,
No? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear Mr. Armbruster.
I am not in favor of the variance.
Okay, no. Okay, and Ms. Crow.
In favor.
Okay, that motion passes 3-2. Thank you.
That's the vote, sir.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Tell your wife, I hope I can scare her in the driveway. I'm sorry, I was probably in the driveway today when she tried to pull behind me on my right, and I hope I didn't scare her.
I was sitting in the driveway when she came out of the house, and I was worried the same thing. I'm with the Board of Zoning Appeals.
She probably says, gosh, all these people.
Who are you?
Somebody pulled in as I was leaving with a truck and a trailer attached, and I just
Yeah,
waved.
yeah.
Was that you?
No, that wasn't me.
Okay.
No. Listen, guys, again, I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good luck,
Good
sir.
luck.
Thank you.
Okay, if we could have a motion to adjourn and then we can talk a little bit after that, then I'll have Katie suspend the live feed in after we do a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I would make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion passes. And I'll wait for Ms. Smith to let us know when we're back to regular discussion.
So perhaps.